Behind this terrible quality grainy video footage is a little boy with the biggest grin on his face, because he's just built something fantastic.
Yes.
Now, seeing as we're so incredibly close to the finish line, this episode is basically going to be improving stuff that I've done not quite as well as I should have done, as well as making the car so it doesn't tear itself apart when you accelerate. So, starting with the intercoolers.
Now, I'm not sure about you, but I'm pretty fed up of this. Weird red tape on my water-to-air intercoolers. They're not actually doing anything yet, so I think I'm going to change that. It's now time for a bit of this. Computing on the Putin. Now this part is going to be slightly anxiety-inducing. A bit like when I didn't know if the engine was going to fit or not, or if I just ruined the car by ripping out 20 kilos of wiring, or when I was trying to get it to start for the first time. And this time, hopefully for the final time, it involves ECUs. Again. And off camera there have been many things that I've had to sort out before any ECU work can happen. One such thing causing many problems is this brake switch. I accidentally cut it out in the first place, and then I reinstated all the wiring. Different shot to retain interest. You might think, it's just a brake switch, all it does is turn on my tail lights. And you'd be wrong. It actually does quite a lot for the running environment of the car. For example, if you put on the brake and the accelerator at the same time. This is a safety feature. If the switch isn't working properly, you'll get problems at the low revs of the engine. As I've experienced. Because when I'm driving this car, it's got absolutely nothing at the low end, and feels like a spaceship taking off at the high revs. Now, contrary to what you may think, I don't know anything about tuning. I also don't know anything about the specific coding involved in these Volkswagen ECUs. And the consequences of getting this wrong if I try and learn the architecture and stuff myself mean that I could have a couple of bricked ECUs in a car that's never going to work again. So I outsourced. Now with these tuning modules, there are about 4 things you can do with them. One of which you should never do. Guess which one I did? So naturally, while someone else is sorting out my fuck up, I'm going to do something else. And this something else relates to handbrakes. Again. Now previously on really long and drawn out car builds, I used this, which is the cable that operates my sway bar disconnect over here, which I'm obviously not going to be using. And this was attached to this cable here, which operated my transmission handbrake here, which I made a few episodes ago. Now while this worked quite nicely, I decided that manual labour is for peasants, which is why I've decided to make it electric. And this is all done. I've basically made a little bracket there to hold the cable, hold the actuator, and then act as a weird little thing to make the cable go tight. But there's more to it than this. And the more to it than this involves how do you control this weird little motor thing? Because if I just turn it on and let it do its thing, it's just going to pull that cable apart and it'll snap and then I won't have a handbrake at all. Now this is where critical thinking comes into play. There are a few options here. I could use an Arduino with a couple of relays to control this into a reverse polarity handbrake actuator thing. Or I could do it manually with a switch and have it operate on a reverse polarity, similarly to my wonderful gym equipment, because that's how that works. Now while that would work well as controlling it, it wouldn't solve the issue of massively overtensioning the handbrake cable if I left it to its own devices. So why not use a DC motor controller? And the reason this is so suitable for the job at hand is because of this little screw. DC motors generally control the forwards and backwards of DC motors, with an added bonus of being able to control the amount of amp draw. And what this means is once you set this, and the motor reaches a certain level of power draw, this will shut off. And this is an excellent thing in my situation. Because firstly, it means that my cable won't tear itself to bits. And it also means that it'll be relatively self-adjusting, which is excellent. So we're back under the car after test wiring up all that nonsense. I'm using this 12-volt battery, and this is all wired up to the switch that should hopefully control the amps quite nicely. And I'm using this weird little rotary switch, mostly because it's the same as the one they include in a Willwood kit that they charge about 100 times more than I paid for this. So, that's probably reached the tension it's supposed to. This is nice and tight. Drive shaft unable to be turned. And then if I want to back it off, marvellous. I'm just going to try adjusting this in a little bit just to make sure that it's not using the entire travel that's available to the RAM. So there's about 10 mil of movement there before it starts to engage. And now if I go back over here and play with my little switch, that was getting a bit tighter than I'd like. Alright, bit of adjustment later. This is take 2. And now it stops once a proper tension is reached, and it's not trying to tear itself apart. Nice. Now, something to keep in mind if you're going to try this at home. Voltage matters, because it's a function of amps and volts. That means if your engine's off or it's a little bit low, your motor's going to draw more amps. So to combat this, when I install this, I'm going to put a voltage regulator in there to make sure it's getting a constant 12 volts, even if the battery is above that. Because there's about 10 volts in this battery right now, which means that to make up the watts with 10 volts, I need more amps. But if you went to high school, you'd know that already. Anyway. Now aside from the whens and when not to apply voltage to this, to be legal, I also need something that's going to trigger that little light that comes on in your dash when your handbrake comes on. And that's going to be pretty simple. Basically, these are the 2 red wires that go to the motor. All I'd have to do is add a twin coil latching relay in there, because these voltages are going to be switched between positive and negative anyway. And what that would mean is that the relay would switch one way with a positive charge and pull back the other way with a negative charge, which would open and close the circuit for that little light. The handbrake kinda done, but will be more done with other things I'm doing. On a completely related note, I've decided to make a rear draw setup that holds my batteries and stuff. And here's how it's coming along so far. And the idea for making this out of 2020 aluminium extrusion was not mine. Credit goes out to certain South Australia dwellers, because that thing I made in my troopy kind of sucked. Anyway, there seems to be a draw missing. Let's make one. And does it fit? Of course it bloody does. Firstly, because I made it, and secondly, because it was done in CAD, so it means there's basically no human error. Anticipation. Wow, a drawer doing drawer things. Listen. Now that scraping line is about there. It warped a bit when I made it, but once I put this front panel on, that'll kind of pull it back up straight again. So I don't care about that. Note to self, replace your consumables. This is one of those rare occasions where everything has gone absolutely perfectly the first time around. It's not like it's a complicated piece of equipment, but it still feels nice when it happens. Even little details, like in that corner, the contours are exactly perfect with the same contours of the car. I'll put a picture, I'm not moving the camera. Anyway, stainless wise, all I have to do is that little corner. But if you've seen me do one thing, you've seen me do everything else. So we can do it like this. Amazing. Now you might have noticed something. I know, it's not very obvious. But that's typically not how drawers work. So I need something to go on top of here. There it is. Now I think this has earned a bit of self-fellatio. These are the two factory batteries, each one in an individual tray and vented to the external of the car. So this should all be compliant with the relevant ADRs. The way I've got this latching thing worked out by doing the thickness of the carpet twice, plus a 9mm bit of marine ply. You've then got to figure out the gap between this weird little latch thing and this weird little shelf bit here. And as it happens, that's about 7mm, which just so happens to be almost exactly the same measurement as the distance between here and the carpet when it's squished a bit. And the result is this. Now you do have to punch it to get it to sit in properly, but who doesn't enjoy a bit of domestic violence on a Monday morning? Anyway, drawer system done. And I've done it in such a way that when the seats are down, there's almost a level platform there. And when the seats are up, it acts like a normal car. And even though the drawers are completely full of junk, it almost looks like something that's bought, rather than something completely homemade by an imbecile. Anyway, what sort of person would I be if I didn't end this episode by bullying someone slightly? Come on, Mr. Finger. That was pathetic, and no way to end a build series. So, as I said, this is not the last episode, but the next one will be. And the next one is going to be bloody fantastic. So do that.
Okay. You're a piece of shit.
Good luck, adventurer.
You're a piece of shit. But, yep. I'll do...